how do we engage our customers in the most meaningful, impactful ways, whether it's a salesperson or so on. I'll set that to the side for a moment and let me focus on the manager and what they do.
Welcome to the 1% Edge podcast, where we dive into the journeys of extraordinary guests committed to getting 1% better every day. Today's hot topic: the role of the sales manager, especially in today's environment. And to help us out with that, I'm honored to have Dave Brock, founder and CEO of Partners in Excellence, and also the author of Sales Manager Survival Guide. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Carlos. It's really, I appreciate being invited, and this is such a critical topic. I love talking to you about it.
And I agree with you. The more I talk to some of my clients, right, a lot of times we'll implement a sales program, a process, a methodology. And I'd say the number one reason it usually goes sideways or doesn't live out to its potential is the lack of buy-in and reinforcement by sales leadership.
Yes,
across
absolutely.
the board.
Absolutely.
So for our audience, let's do this. Because sales management or sales manager can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. What does it mean to you, Dave? If we had to define it?
So first of all, we'll talk about kind of defining it, and then what's their job. So defining it really is a person that is responsible for leading a team of people. So it may be a frontline sales manager. I tend to spend a lot of time with them where they have a bunch of individual contributors, whether they're AEs, SDRs, BDRs, account managers, or something like that. You could go up into middle levels of management where they typically, if I look at the client I was just on with, this was a CRO who had 3 global managers, and those global managers had a series of more regional managers, and it cascaded down. So if I look at the overall management structure in this organization, there are about 100 managers managing, close to 1,000, or actually over 1,000 people. So,
Wow.
So the manager is somebody who has the responsibility of managing and leading a number of people, reporting to that person. They could be managers, they could be individual contributors.
Is it specific to a certain industry? Like, are we talking mostly tech, or can we, does it relate to other industries as well?
That role exists in any industry that has some sort of sales or go-to-market organization. They may call them by different names. Some are fitting the industry, some are fitting the egos of the people in those jobs, but they may call them by different names. But I think the most critical thing is so this exists in any kind of go-to-market or selling organization. But where I find the biggest understanding is not, that we have the org chart correctly, is what is the manager's job?
Got it. So let's talk about that next. What is their main job?
So this is, I speak to a lot of people and all that, and usually one of the things that I do when I'm in front of a group of managers is I ask them a question. I say, what is your job? And most of them look at me, they're kind of cross-eyed. They say, gee, you got white hair, you're an old fart, you probably don't understand. And, and they say, our job is to make the numbers. And I say, you've got it wrong. It's your people's job to make the numbers, particularly if I'm looking at frontline managers. It's your people's job to make the numbers. Your job as a manager is to maximize their performance. And that's a very, very different job than making the numbers. And it shifts your mindset in the most important ways that you can. So what you do is say, how do I maximize the performance of each person on my team? How do I maximize them both in the short term, but how do I maximize their growth in the long term so that they can contribute at higher levels?
All right. I love that. I really like that because you're right. Most of them would probably lean to it's, hitting the net revenue target because that's what they see getting paid by. But you are correct. I mean, that revenue target that they're responsible for is really made up of the individual quotas of their team.
Correct.
And their job is really growing, maturing, helping that team get to their individual numbers, which ultimately allows that manager to get to. Did I say that right?
Yep. Yep.
Now, right off the bat, here's the challenge I see out there, and maybe some people are going to call me old and being, thinking about generations, but sales over the last, let's say, 20 years, a lot of companies got away with, hey, show them a great product, send them an order, they buy, and we've promoted a lot of those people that were successful at sales those days that are now those front line and second line managers.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a lot of coaching. So I think about today's environment where deals are falling under greater scrutiny. And, you've been around, Dave, just like me, that ebbs and flows over time and depends on the industry and product. But overall, it just feels like, people are a little bit more risk averse over the last few years.
Yeah.
And it requires a sales rep to elevate or find ways to not only show them that they could solve a problem, but really help them justify why they should pull the trigger now. Are you seeing that the same? And if so, how do we how do we help those sales managers that haven't even had the fight? They're trying to get their team to get better in an environment that they didn't really face themselves.
Yeah. So you're conflating a couple of absolutely critical issues.
Okay.
One is how do we engage our customers in the most meaningful, impactful ways? Whether it's a salesperson or so on. I'll set that to the side for a moment and let me focus on the manager and what they do. One is again, first of all, the big problem that we see is managers don't know what their job is. Just that simple statement I made before of your job is to maximize the performance of each one of your people. They don't understand that. So consequently, they don't know how to do their job. They aren't getting the right coaching, training, or development from their managers. Two is you see this huge mistake that, and as you pointed out, is so often we take our very, very top performers and say, you're the top performer, let me move you into a sales management role. And usually that's a double whammy. It's not only have I lost my very top performer, but I put somebody in the role who absolutely sucks at being a manager. And also, as we look at moving people into the management roles, we have to really look at what are the competencies, what are the skills, what are the things that person needs to do. And as I look at the people that I'm moving into that role, whether it's a salesperson in my organization, whether it's hiring somebody from the outside, I have to say, do they have the competencies, the behaviors, the experience? Do they have the cultural alignment and things like that allows them to perform in that job really well? If they happen to have been a great salesperson, that's kind of icing on the cake. But you don't move them into the management role because they were a great salesperson. So that's kind of one of the big mistakes we do. And then the thing is, how do we train a sales manager? How do they know how to coach? How do they know when and what to do? How do they know how to look at the performance of their team? Part of a sales manager's job is to get them the resources they need to help them do their job and maximize performance. How do they know what those are and how they might acquire them? So a lot of it is the manager needs to shelter the salespeople from the vagaries, however well-intended, of the corporation. I had a very large client a number of years ago, very large, very high-performing sales organization, and we did something that said time available for selling. And we looked at time available for selling. That says preparing for a meeting, conducting the meeting, doing the follow-up for the meeting, and that kind of thing. It turned out in this company, it's a global 250 company. They had 10% of their time available for selling.
Wow.
And what we did is when we said, what's happening to the other 90%? It was the well-intended organization interacting with them, asking them for help, asking them for their opinion about what customers wanted to do. It was their process about how they get these complex deals approved and priced and all those sorts of things. So all this stuff was taking away from their time to sell. And so, and as a result, they didn't have enough. So we did some changes. We did some redesign. We just, made people conscious of what was happening and the impact of what it was with salespeople. And we were able within probably a year to get it up to 42%. And some of that was organizational design. Some of that was behavioral design. Some of it was saying, you can't have every marketing person go ask, or every product manager go ask every salesperson for their views of this new product that was coming out. You can, you ask 10% of them and you've got enough information. So,
Right.
so there are just simple things like that. And also, but the manager doesn't know these things. So how do they get the support they need? How do they protect their salespeople from the well-intended motions of their people? What tools do they need? How do they coach them? How do they train them? Where can they help them in the most appropriate ways in working with their customers, whether it's coaching with customers or whether it's making calls with them and so on. So most people don't know that, so they need to be trained themselves in how to do that, and how to work most effectively with their people.
Is there, based on your work, is there a percentage of time that reps should be spending on sales?
That's one of those it depends kinds of things. I always like to say if I can get 50%, that's probably a really good impact. It's probably,
Yeah. Because I thought I saw a study, and I don't remember who it's from, so I'm not going to try to guess, that it was something to the effect like 20 some odd percent of the time they're actually selling. I guess this was across multiple companies.
yeah.
And I thought, might be true because I have some clients that have, like you said, complex processes for getting orders through and approved and different resources. I mean, they've thrown a million roadblocks at these poor reps, and then they keep asking them to do more.
Right.
And they'd be lucky if they got 20, 25% of their time to sell.
Yeah. And again, you just kind of think, what you have to do is kind of look in and say, what's happening to that other 75 to 80%? Are there things that we can do? And there's some things that we do and sellers do out of just simple bad habit. We look at things of we're constantly, people are introducing new programs, new things to do and so on. And we pile it on top of everything that we've already done. So all of a sudden our time becomes unmanageable. We have all these things. When I work with clients and they say, here's this new program, here's this new initiative. We're going to, enable the salespeople how to do it. We're going to coach them. We're going to provide them the tools, the technology to do it, and all those wonderful things. And I said, wonderful. What two things are you going to stop? And they look at me and they say, what do you mean? I said, your sellers are busy 7x24, and if we could create a 30-hour day, they'd be busy 7x30. And also, the only way this is going to be successful is you have to stop at least two things that they're currently doing. What are you going to stop? And that kind of starts, helping people start understanding this pile-on effect that we have. Recently, I've been running a series of workshops. Actually, it's a terrible effect on sellers. It's an even worse effect on managers all the way up. It seems the higher in the food chain you go, it becomes even worse. And I was sitting a couple of months ago in San Diego with a huge team. It was the sales leadership team for a fairly large company. And they were just going crazy. I'd look at each one of their calendars and say, what's going on. In fact, I happen to be having a call with the CRO about an hour after we finish this. And, I know that there is an 80% possibility that the call will be postponed, even though it's a very important call to this CRO, because something will come up and the CRO will have to feels the urgency to have to jump on it and so on. And so you look at all these things that are continually changing and the ripple through effect to all the people that they're having meetings with. So we got together in this meeting, and it's, I hope I don't offend your audience, but we called the meeting "Shit, We Have to Stop."
I like it.
And what it was really revelatory. It was, I asked them to do things I asked them to fill out by 3 of these yellow sticky pads. And these happen to have 80 stickies on it. I said, the first sticky is things that I'm doing that I need to stop. The second thing is things that I'm doing that somebody else should be doing. And the third one is things that I'm doing that somebody else should be doing, but I don't know how. And so what we found was just magic. I mean, first they were annoyed. Dave, I can't fill out 84, 3 pads of 80 of these. I said, do it. If you get down to the point that says, I'm taking too many coffee breaks, then we kind of know we've exhausted you. But and what we found is there were just things through habit. I've always done these. They saw meetings. I've always done these meetings. And it's, why are you doing those meetings? Well, just because we've always done them. Do you need to have them? So they stopped those things. The second 2 were the most revelatory is we are doing things that aren't our job. And so there was very unclear workflow, roles, and responsibilities. We found redundant activities across the organization, not just in the sales organization. And we found lots of things falling through the cracks. So now we could start redoing it to get things off their calendars, to get to people who are the right people to be doing those things. And then the most revelatory thing was things had changed so much in several years that they were doing things that they didn't know who had the responsibility to. And we've seen everything has changed. Do we need to define some new functions? Do we need to put in place some new capabilities, some new organization or some new tools to be able to do these things? Because they clearly aren't your job, but they need to get done.
Right. So, all right. So let's say we get them spending, we prioritize their time, get them spending time on the right activities or behaviors. You mentioned coaching, and I feel like it's a hot term right now, especially with AI. In fact, this is where I'm leading the question is, how do they get much better at coaching, or because there's all these AI coaching tools coming out now that are trying to practice a sales call, practice the discovery call, practice the new product pitch with them. And they can automate a lot of this stuff where you don't need the manager to sit down with you and do it. So how do you get better at coaching? What are your feelings on that?
So one, I think one is understanding what coaching is and understanding what high impact coaching is. I mean, coaching today has become the thing where we put all this junk into and we somehow label it coaching. And also, so I could say, I could be a very directive coach. I could say, Carlos, you need to do this, 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 and this. Come back to me in a week and tell me how it goes. And we call that coaching. But that's probably the worst possible coaching you can give a person. And also, so one is, what is coaching? And then how do I do high impact coaching?
Okay.
And so then high impact coaching you look at 2 different kinds of coaching styles. They can be directive and non-directive. And some people would say you need to do more of the non-directive types of things that say, let me ask you some questions. Let me help you learn. Let me help you discover that yourself. And in general, I'm biased towards that. But there's sometimes where directive absolutely helps. If you and I are sitting side by side in a car, you're driving, and you're heading at 60 miles an hour towards a telephone pole, I'm not going to say, Carlos, is there a different way we should be thinking about this? Have you considered other alternatives? Have you considered turning the steering wheel or so on? I'm going to say, Carlos, put the goddamn brake on.
Fair enough.
So sometimes directive coaching, because of the situation, because of perhaps the risk of the situation, the urgency of the situation, sometimes directive coaching works really well. But more generally, we tend to bias it towards non-directive coaching, because I think what managers lose too is you're not just coaching this particular situation, but you're using this situation as a model that you hope that they take to other similar situations. So for instance, if I'm coaching a deal, I want to help them think about their strategy for the deal. I want to help them think about where things could go off the rails, things that we're missing, what the next steps are, how to move the customer through the deal. So I want them to think about those things specific to the deal. But at the same time, I want them to start thinking, I should be applying this process to every single deal that I do.
Right.
And so that's where you get the tremendous multiplier effect. One of the things that we've seen where people use highly directive coaching is to maximize performance, you have to coach every single deal, 100% of the deals. You don't have the time to do that, and so on and so forth. So now if you start doing this where they start saying, I should be non-directive, or I can apply this to every other deal, now all you have to do is focus on the 2 or 3 most critical deals. You don't have to inspect everything else that's going on.
I agree with that. In fact, I try to use that with them as well. It's like, we talk about inspect with the expect, and the pushback I usually get is, well, Carlos, I can't be inspecting all their deals. I go, no one's asking you to. But can you pick the top strategic deals that you really need for the quarter and use those as the example? Yeah. And if the rep will see value in it, they're more likely to follow that behavior on other deals.
And as you start seeing them, as you sit down doing these reviews, as you start seeing them think correctly, starting to think about where do we need to go, where could we get derailed, as they start kind of thinking about that, they're doing that not just for this deal and because they're sitting down with you, Carlos, and know that you expect them to do that, but they're applying that thinking in every single deal that you have. And so that's what we need to do in these kinds of things is, how do we find the multiplier effects?
Yep. Well, speaking of which, and again, it seems like it wouldn't be a podcast if I don't mention AI. What about these AI tools that are helping reps with their coaching or helping managers with their coaching? How do you feel about those?
There are a huge number of them. Some are very, very good. And some are very narrowly focused. So we have to recognize the limitations of them. And also, so for instance, there are a huge number of kind of call recording, conversational intelligence tools that can give insights into how they're conducting these calls. So, and sometimes those can be used very powerfully by the salesperson, kind of looking at the reviews, looking at the analysis. Sometimes they can be used very powerfully by the managers in coaching the salespeople, but that's just one area. Then you have things like role play and so on and so forth. There are very few tools that kind of look across the entire job of a seller and look at how can we coach them across their pipeline, across their deals, across their sales calls, across skills development and so on. And here I have to do kind of a commercial announcement. I happen to sit on the board and be an investor in the best company I've seen doing this. It's called Grow.ai, GRW.ai. It is by far the most comprehensive coaching tool that I've ever seen. Does it do everything? No, but it does help amplify what the manager does. It doesn't displace the manager, but it again, I like to post it as it amplifies it.
I like it. It's funny because I had another company that was on the podcast, which I haven't released yet, which will come out before this thing comes out. So it'll be released by then. And then there's also a partner company that I've partnered with that we use with our clients. And I mean, some of the things I'm seeing, it's great, especially for modeling that most precious conversation with the end client.
Yeah.
Nobody likes the role play. And I also feel like it's a generational thing too. Like, they like it even less. So this allows them to do basically role playing on their own, with an AI, so they don't take offense from it. And it grades them on a call, gives them areas to work on and gaps. And I think, although I think the companies in that space are new, I think it's a great place to be.
Yeah, but here again, I would exercise caution. It's a tool to help and support things, but it doesn't displace the manager, for instance, doing a role. And all, because there's some things that the AI will miss that are so contextually specific or so behaviorally specific that happens in the moment, and the AI doesn't get that. And that's where the manager can see that and understand the contextual stuff, understand the behavioral stuff, understand what's really going on that isn't being spoken, and can incorporate that into the role play. So while we have these great tools that can help us with role plays, with conversational intelligence and things like that, again, that's meant to amplify, not displace what the manager is doing in conducting role plays herself, or in doing, in looking at how they leverage conversational intelligence.
Great point. So Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you become such an expert on sales leadership, sales management?
I think I became an expert on it by the thousands of mistakes I made. so and what I learned from it, and also. So I've been involved in selling with various types of companies for a very, very long time. I've also held more senior roles. Most of them are kind of CEO, CRO type roles with some fairly large organizations and all. But at the fundamental is we're always selling, and I have a tremendous passion for selling. So and when I look at like sales managers, and particularly the frontline sales manager, they have the single highest impact on performance of anything in the organization, more than the tools, more than the enablement, more than the training, more than the strategies and all that. They have that impact. And I have just such a passion for them because of what they can contribute in driving performance in the organization. But most of them are left without the tools, without the coaching and all that kind of thing. So I spent a lot of time working with them to do that.
Excellent. And you wrote a book on it, which is amazing.
Yep.
If I had a copy of it, I'd be showing up. So that's what I sometimes do on the video. So Dave, tell us, what's your 1% edge? What are you working on these days to get 1% better?
So what I'm working on, and actually working on with a lot of my clients, is how we leverage these AI tools, and how we leverage them in very, very unique ways. It's interesting. I can't say the name of the company, but it's one of the largest companies in the sales space, and very advanced with AI. And they called me and said, "We've seen what you're doing. We need to use AI the way you're using AI." So I use AI in a very, very different way. And it's like working with these companies and trying to figure out, how do we amplify the capabilities? And it's everybody says it, but the part that we miss about AI is kind of the human piece. And so the question that I'm always challenging my clients with, and challenging this organization, is we talk about all the things that AI can do. The most important question we should be asking ourselves are, what are the things that AI can't do? And do we have the skills and capabilities to do those things that AI can't do? So that's really kind of That's actually not a 1%er. That's at least a 50%er.
Interesting. And I agree with you. You know, I think companies are struggling to figure out this big wave of AI. How do I leverage it with my organization? Not just necessarily replace a person with it, but hey, how do I make the people I do have more productive as I grow, and leverage it where it has a real impact?
Yeah, and see, that's here. I think our focus is so kind of unconsciously misdirected. And I always hate using this quote, but it's a very appropriate quote. It's Wayne Gretzky's old quote is, "I never skate to where the puck is. I skate to where it's going to be." So much of our focus right now is skating to where the puck is. And we're not imagining, where is it going? What does that mean in terms of how we engage our customers, in terms of what sellers actually do in this new world? What roles are we need to have in the GTM kind of thing. So again, we're looking at things of, can it write my emails for me? Can it manage my calendar for me? Can it do all those sorts of stuff? That's the nonsense stuff that is distracting right now. But the real power is, where is this going? And the real fundamental question is, what can't it do? And how do I do it?
Excellent. Agreed. All right, Dave, if people want to reach out to you and get to know you better, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Probably the easiest way, connect through LinkedIn, send me an invitation, or, I'm posting on there expressing, these weird oddball opinions all the time. They can visit my blog. It's partnersinexcellenceblog.com. I publish a huge amount of stuff there, and they can sign up for the newsletter or reach out to me directly in email.
Excellent. In fact, for our listeners, I saw Dave on another podcast type event, and I reached out to him for the event that we were in, and that's what got the ball rolling and got me connected to Dave. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. What you're doing it's so important, and so I'm flattered to be part of what you're trying to do. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dave. All right, everyone. That does it for this week's episode. If you found some value in it, please comment back, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the greatest success. Thanks, Dave.